Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast with Ollie Rock. David Cunningham is the Chief Innovation Officer at Reed Smith and a longtime force behind some of the legal industry's most transformative changes. David has helped shape how large law firms approach technology, talent, and client service. Before joining Reed Smith, he spent over a decade at Thomson Reuters and then led strategic projects at Winston & Strawn, where he worked directly with leadership to modernize firm infrastructure and drive cross-functional collaboration. In this episode, David shares how innovation actually works inside large law firms and why cultural change is harder than tech change, and how young lawyers can position themselves to lead the future of legal services. We hope you enjoy the episode. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Let's start off with kind of a lighthearted icebreaker. My question is, what's your favorite part about being CIO at Reed Smith?
Well, I'll clarify the title. CIO we use as our IT leader. So just to differentiate, we call the innovation role the CINO, if you have to abbreviate. But so I don't lead IT, just to clarify. But that's part of the answer is I used to do both. I used to kind of lead IT at a previous firm and work to innovate. And it's tough to do both. One is more about stability and not changing, and the other is about how do we disrupt and constantly change. And so it is a luxury that while I work closely with our IT department every day, our pure focus is on projects. How do we really accelerate, incubate, change in other areas of the firm? And we spend as little time as possible actually operating and maintaining the status quo. So it's a luxury to do something like that.
Love to hear it. Yeah, I mean, you've had a fascinating path, consulting, you founded Legal Metrics, and now you're leading innovation at Reed Smith. So how did this all begin? Take us back to, when you first graduated college and you worked at HBR Consulting.
Yeah. That was really, I didn't have any, coming out of college, my degree was in business, and I really enjoyed the technology, just the, at that point, programming and learning how to operate computers. And I fell into a job. It was a summer job at first while I was in school. And then when I graduated, I was promoted to lead the technology at my part of the National Science Foundation. And so that was great. I learned the technology. My degree was in business. So I've always been a hybrid of those two. And when I wanted to focus more on the technology, I found I wasn't seeking out something in the legal market. It was new to me, but I found even before it was called HBR, the BR part called Baker Robbins was just about 5 people, barely out of the garage, basically. So it was kind of a startup at the time. I was the first new hire, and our focus was on helping law firms with technology. And I guess a good part of that is law firms are really bad at technology in most cases, even though we'll talk today about all the opportunity and good things we're doing. So I really loved the consulting part because I got to visit over 200 firms over the first 20 years of my career, traveling to these firms, getting inside their walls, spending time with them and learning what you're doing. And my job was to really use that industry perspective, global industry perspective, to say, here's where you are good, here's where you're not good, and then putting a roadmap in for them to say, here's how you can improve your situation. And I loved the fact that it wasn't just to, almost like we were saying before, it's not to keep things running, it's to say, how do we leap forward? And they only would hire me or our team if they felt like something wasn't good enough, and then we were there to identify, how do you get there?
Amazing.
And I really enjoyed that and got to know everybody in the industry over that time period.
That's awesome to hear. And can you paint sort of a broad stroke picture of like what was technology like back when you started in 1991? What did that look like?
That's a bit silly of an answer, but really at the time, networking was new. It's a little silly to think about, but the fact that the computers were connected was a bit new. Moving on to Windows was a bit new at the time, if you can imagine. There was still a consideration of, do we go with Mac or Windows? That was a big question. there were even, this is even worse, there were a lot of firms that were still on kind of mini mainframes, weighing systems. And so there's actually what we know today is the primary legal technology conference, ILTA. Today started off as the weighing users group, way back then before my time. And so that was a big deal. How do we actually move on to, modern computers when PCs are still kind of new? I mean, that's really ancient stuff, but, and, but back then they were having the same conversations, like will computers replace our secretaries and, et cetera. And so, the questions we have today are similar, rhyme with the questions we had, at every generational change, but, nevertheless, the firm still grows. And, so it's good to have that perspective, but, it's also sometimes slow to see how we haven't changed nearly enough in that time period. Like, sure, the computer systems are, so much incredibly better, but people are still acting manually, in too many ways. It's a shame we haven't changed more, frankly.
Yeah, I just want to comment on, how history repeats itself, because it sounds like there was also that doom and gloom back then, like the internet's going to take our jobs. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I would say at that point, it wasn't the lawyers fearing for the jobs. It was really saying, do we need as many staff? Like, if I'm typing my own documents, do I need a secretary anymore? So I would say it's newer that the lawyers are having a crisis to say, will I be needed anymore? That certainly wasn't the case when Windows came out. So
Interesting.
yeah.
And you were there for just over 20 years. Can you talk about your career progression? I know you wrote online that it grew from 12 to 120 consultants, your team. But what did that look like over those 20 years?
Yeah, it was. I live in Houston, Texas, and so I started off working with the firms in Texas, Houston, Dallas, Austin, et cetera. And then as I started working for larger firms, and then really there was a big pivot for me. Is I went to go. I was basically seconded to Freshfields, which is a very large firm in London. At the time, they were the third largest firm in the world, and they had just merged. The Freshfields and English Freshfields had merged with the German Bruckhaus Deringer, and so they brought me in as the neutral American to say, how do we successfully go through a merger and bring the firm together, with technology as kind of a tool set to help accelerate that. And that was really such a fascinating project, because I got to see, the German, the French, the Asian, the English cultures, and then be the person to go and spend time in each of those regions of the world, understanding and listening, commiserating with them, like, why are the English acting this way, and the Germans wanted to move faster, and then sitting back, having a strategic perspective, and then helping them develop the plans to bring that together. And it was supposed to be a 6 month project to get started, and then we end up. I was there for 3 years at Freshfields, always seconded, still a consultant, but helping them advise. And then because of that, I expanded to spend time with the other Magic Circle law firms. And then when I was in England for about 5 years, and when I came back, all of the large U.S. firms were hungry for that same knowledge. Like, what are they doing in England? What are the bigger global firms doing, and how do you? And the U.S. firms can be a bit U.S. centric, and so giving them a global perspective. So that was pivotal. It continues to be pivotal for me, because as an American, I could tend to be thinking too much about that our culture of the way we handle litigation, the way we consider ourselves artists and entrepreneurs as lawyers in the United States, isn't necessarily the culture in every country. And that has continued. That was an investment that continues to pay off for me now, working in a firm with 34 offices around the world, and saying, how do we make sure that we come together as one firm? So that was a big pivot. And then then that helped me work with all the largest firms in the world, and that just continued to pay off.
That's amazing. I mean, what a great opportunity. It sounds like that was sort of pivotal in many ways to set the rest of your career.
Yeah, for sure.
And I did see you were founded Home Ahead, which was an investment and guidance for real estate tech service companies, for the tech service company Home Ahead. And was that like a kind of a pivot into the real estate industry?
Yeah, well, good homework. That's not known by most. That that to me totally different than the legal market. But I worked with a group of friends and investors who we had some ideas about how we could create kind of an early warning system in the real estate market about how do you know about homes that are coming onto the market, and how do you let people know that you'd be interested in those. And so we worked on that for a couple of years and built a product and did some things around it. But I would say, one, I never wanted to leave my job to go full time and lead that. And two, we would have had to really dig in. It's one of those companies, like many, where you'd have to lose money for many years in order to make money down the road. And that's just not my nature so we end up moving on. So we're not ready to take on that kind of a model, but it was a fascinating journey, and being part of a startup and building the products and understanding a new market, that helps me even now as we're building products at Reed Smith and leading teams. So it's not something I continue to do, but something I really, another pivotal point for me, I would say.
Incredible. Yeah, that's pretty awesome that you had that experience. I mean, you did go to Winston Strawn after HBR Consulting. So you said that the U.S. firms were curious about how you worked with the European firms.
Right.
How did they get a hold of you? You know, how did that transition actually happen?
Well, I was enjoying consulting, but they were a firm. Interestingly enough, they were going to hire. They did hire us to do an audit of them, just like I did for other firms. And then they came after they hired us, and we got started like 10 hours into the project. They came back and said, "Well, we have to actually hire a Big Four consulting firm that's one of our clients." And so it's the first time we were hired and then told, "Actually, we can't give you the work. We're going to use someone else." And that was really disappointing. Like, we were just never been stopped on a project right at the beginning for a reason like that. So they hired a Big Four. They went through the auditing process, but that auditing process said, you really need to disrupt yourself. You need to have a different type of leadership to take it forward. And it was very serendipitous because they had remembered meeting me and the team when they decided to hire us for the audit. If they had hired us for the audit, I couldn't come in and be their CIO, but they came to me after this third party audit and said, "Hey, would you be interested in being that disruptor within our firm?" And so that was a funny twist. But for them to come to me and said, you tell us it can be better in a firm, can you, instead of writing a report of what's possible, why don't you come here and actually make it happen? And they felt like technology could be a strategic advantage. And that was very compelling to me to say, let's do it. And I learned a lot from that, because I had enjoyed recommending what other people should do, but it also gets frustrating because most firms never actually achieve it. I can write reports all day, but if I were to go back and say, how many firms changed their culture, brought in strong enough leadership, and followed the journey for the 2 to 5 years it takes, very few firms actually got as much better as we were recommending. And so at Winston, that was a chance to actually get in there and long term really make it happen. And I was there for 9 years, which surprised me. But it was a good
2012 to 2021.
Yeah.
And I want to double click on what you just said about how difficult it is to achieve certain technology innovation and adoption goals. Just fundamentally, why is that?
Well, that's our number one topic, even today, at Reed Smith. Part of it is because, excuse me, because people, the lawyers there in the firm, have become successful doing what they did. Part of it is especially in U.S. firms, there is an incentive to hoard things, both for the hours and for the clients. Because if I want to go to another firm, I might want to take that client with me. And so that's a disincentive to think on an enterprise sharing, trusting mindset. That's a real struggle. And then Um, and then, there's often the incentive system is often aligned to say, what are you going to get credit for? And a lot of the programs we're bringing, the initiatives we have, are really saying, how do we work together to make things better together? And that can be at odds with the incentive system. Um, and then you also have, these are the owners of the company, and so there's in most firms there's a friction between staff and lawyers to say, oh, you work for me, I'm the owner. Why are you telling me I should be different? And so we have to earn their respect and be quite skilled in order to go to partners and say, this is a different way of working. We need you to evolve.
Yeah.
And some firms, they don't want that conversation. So.
Super interesting. I mean, it's fascinating to be speaking with you, or you've seen this firsthand for so many years.
For sure.
So I can imagine in some ways it can be, maybe frustrating.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember in one session I was with a bunch of other innovation officers, and just privately to themselves, they're like, and these are people quite experienced, all tenured in the industry, and they're like, do we think we've ever made any difference in these firms? Which is really a sad question, right? You've done, we spend money, you hire really skilled, smart people. Are we making a big enough difference? And that's the challenge we're working through right now at Reed Smith. We've done we've done a huge amount of foundational investment in tech and data. And now we're going through the cultural leadership incentive alignment. And these are the conversations we have very explicitly. Like, if we don't evolve in these ways, then the ROI of these investments will never come. And so I think the biggest impact I'll have at a firm is hopefully the firm I'm in right now. That's my expectation.
Yeah, and let's talk about that before we start talking about some of the new technologies you're seeing. So you were at Winston & Strawn until 2021. Yeah, like you said, almost 10 years.
Yeah.
What motivated you to go to Reed Smith?
Well, one is, by that time I'd built up a great team underneath me, and frankly, they just didn't need me anymore. I really felt like, it's time for me to go because the people underneath me are great, and they can act independently, and I would, organize and provide some insight, clear some paths. But so I felt it was time for me to go, and just by a good coincidence of timing, that's when Reed Smith reached out to me about this role, or their recruiter, and they were a firm I knew to be innovative already, and they didn't have a specific mission to say we need to accomplish this, but they said we're already pretty innovative, but we want to take it to the next level. We don't know what that is, but we know we want to take it up a notch, and I was not also running IT while doing that. And so that was a good change to be more, focused on, and a firm known for innovation and wanted to step on the gas. So that was very nice.
Incredible. So what does a day in your life look like, David, at Reed Smith as Chief Innovation Officer?
Well, it's changed a lot. So maybe I'll give two answers to that. So I've been here 4 years, almost to the day. Initially, we really didn't have, well, I would say our innovation was like 1,000 flowers blooming. It was, our firm is always proud of being entrepreneurial. And so our innovation was all over the place. And so people felt that being innovative was that anybody could come up with an idea and bring it forward to the firm. And that's a good measure. Like the U.S. is known for it being easy to start a business. And so that we're an entrepreneurial culture. But in our firm, there wasn't the synergy across those initiatives. And so we'd have a lot of, a partner would have an idea for an app and develop that app and bring it out to the market, and we win an award for it. But it had nothing to do with an app over here or a strategy there. And so part of my role at the beginning was to, assess that, but then organize all that innovation to say, what are we trying to accomplish? And so, I came up with a 4-year plan on what we needed to do. So at the beginning, it was a lot of defining what is innovation, what are the metrics we're trying to reach, what are the initiatives and the projects and the resources in order to achieve that. And then I had to go build the team to back that up. And so it was a lot of recruiting, a lot of explaining, a lot of charts about, I like to have some charts about the, the way we need a balanced scorecard, basically. Like, we can't just focus on how do we make more money. We have to focus on how do we make, raving fans as clients? How do we balance money with raving fan clients, with really engaged employees, with process excellence? And so I had to explain all that, create the projects, and we didn't have a project management team. We didn't have a solid data team. And so it was standing up a lot of stuff that the firm wasn't previously familiar with, and clearing the path for that. And so I, just worked all the time at that point. But now I'm 4 years in, and I've hired that team, and, we brought in a PhD anthropologist to run our lab. We brought in a change leader from Amazon. We brought in our director of applied AI, who's a former corporate partner. And so really, and we've accelerated, we've doubled plus our data team, et cetera. So now I'm kind of backing out of the way to say, I have to make sure that the initiatives are clear, the objectives and the measures are clear. And then just to keep, most of my job now is just kind of clearing a path so those people are coordinated and can get their job done. And I'm not doing as much hiring myself, because any hiring now is underneath them. So now it's much more focused on culture alignment and being able to define how do we go from piloting something to making it part of our the way we work. We're talking about ways of working a lot, and so the change process of going from piloting and evaluating whether we should do something to making it a firm-wide habit is the core of our work now. That's a very different. It's a long answer, but it's a very different role.
No, it's really interesting because, I guess like when I was thinking about chief innovation officer, I was mostly thinking technology, but culture and organization sounds like it's so much of a part of it. Is that accurate to say?
It's the difference between success and failure, I would say.
Wow.
The technology is table stakes. Like, of course, there's technology, definitely. And when I interviewed 15 chief innovation officers last year, and because I wanted to work together with a few of them to say, hey, we're working toward some metrics, maybe you can work with us. We have some, data science things we're doing. But I found that the firms were much more siloed. I thought there was more openness, but the innovation officers were mainly about KM and generative AI, which are infinite topics among themselves, but they often weren't leading the data program. That was generally under IT. And they weren't innovating in the business areas of the firm. Like, if they went to marketing and said, how can I help you be innovative? They were often pushed back. So they either didn't see that as their job or were pushed back when they thought they could help. And so it was, and I did those interviews with some other, with some university professors, and we were, we sat back and said, wow, it's really the organization is too strong for true innovation in most firms. And so that's an example where they had the technology, but they weren't able to make, real organizational change and work together to things. And we're not, we haven't accomplished those goals either, but I would say that our, we don't have the barriers. I work with marketing, 19 times a day, and finance. And so those barriers we've ended a long time ago. And so we made sure first that we understood, the mission, that we had to all be on the same page and work together. Like, innovation is horizontal. It's how do we accelerate anything in the firm that's not moving fast enough? It's not just how do we put in generative AI, and that's a very different mission.
Yeah, I mean, that made me think about like, it's always the discussion is about AI, AI, AI.
Fair.
Um,
Yeah.
so before we move to the technology discussion, I mean, let's move into it. I'm curious, like, other than AI, what kind of technologies have you been seeing that have been disruptive or interesting for you?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, and don't get me wrong, AI is certainly a primary topic for us as
We'll
well.
get into that.
Yeah, fair. Um, I would say the number one area outside of 100% AI is around the pipeline of work coming toward the firm, because most firms, they track things in arrears. Like how billable are we? How much of my bills did I collect? And so these are lagging indicators of the firm's performance. And we wanted to grow up as a real company and say, well, we should also know the work that's being sold right now, our sales pipeline per se. But we also wanted to understand the client's perspective of work we should be involved in. And so we called it like a risk radar. And so we talked to a few clients and said, what if we could understand your company and your industry well enough to help understand what legal matters or risks are coming towards you, and we can share that information with you. And the clients were like, wow, it sounds like a fantasy. It'd be great to have that perspective. And so for us, that's a blend of client engagement, client intelligence, but selfishly, it's also our sales pipeline. Like if we know what's coming toward a client and we can get involved as early as possible, that's much better than passively sitting back and saying, I hope an RFI comes in the door and we can pitch on it. Um,
Totally.
and so we said, so we've got Salesforce, and we have a global experience database, and we have a global relationships analytics system, and five other marketing systems, and then we build a client intelligence team around that, and then we build a unified interface on top of that, which sounds kind of weird. But we didn't want our lawyers to have to go to different systems to say, I need to know something about a client or an industry. We wanted to say, let's create a lawyer friendly system interface that's on your phone when you need it, that looks across our data warehouse, our experience database, our relationships, and curates the right information. Like every partner should know these 10 things about a client before they meet with them. Like who knows them, even if it's our alumni. We ought to know, who has met with them recently, who knows them. Do we have any alumni that work there? Do we have a recent lateral partner that just joined that has a relationship there that we didn't know about last week? And so just making those connections is really important. Um,
Yeah, for
and so the
sure.
whole, the intelligence module, there's not a lot of AI. There's some, a little bit of, we have one data scientist. We have AI kind of serving up some draft emails to lawyers based on the data, et cetera. But most of it is rather traditional tech with tons and tons of data, um, and now we are ramping up from piloting in 10 groups to being we're committed in a year to be firm wide with that system and it to be a
Amazing.
mandatory system that everybody uses. That's a big change for us.
As a former software sales rep, that fires me up because
Right,
I'm
good.
very familiar with the CRM. I
Oh,
mean, this is
perfect.
kind of a tangent, but like over your career, have you just been held relationships with certain reps for like decades?
Yeah, there's certain, well, yes and no, I guess. The traditional legal tech vendors have trouble keeping up in this space, and so we and the and so yes, but I have to say that some of the companies I've worked with for 20, 30 years are not the ones that are core relationships to move fast, if that's a polite
Interesting.
way of saying. um, it's not always the same companies at the core. So yes, but not everyday relationships.
Yeah, I mean, it's you got to keep innovating, I guess, to stay relevant. But
Yeah.
I do want to say, David, 8 months ago, I saw an interview on YouTube you did where you said AI is not yet good enough to do legal research. So I'm curious, has your stance on that changed?
Yeah. Yeah. It was certainly 8 months ago. That's true. We are just now providing pilots of AI research systems to our lawyers. And so, um, so yes, we believe it's good enough for us to pilot. So that is a
Gotcha.
big change. We maybe we're naive, but when these systems first came out, we thought, oh, legal research will be the primary case, and that was a total. It certainly was not. But that world has definitely changed. It's quite impressive in certain areas, and we're providing it, I would say, aggressively in pilots to our lawyers. So definitely.
Totally. It changes so fast and it's such a hot topic. I mean, let's talk about young lawyers coming in, law students, juniors. You told me earlier that you're focusing heavily on the summer program.
Yeah.
What can folks be doing to prepare themselves as they're coming into, these big firms to prepare for AI?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I would think, and others have thought that age would be a predictor of the comfort in adopting generative AI, and it is not proven true in our firm. Um, and so we have some senior partners that are our biggest, loudest advocates, and we had to convert them. They were skeptical, then we got them up to speed, and now they're the ones pushing it to the team and saying, no one on my team should be working without AI. Those are words that we hear in our firm now.
Crazy.
Um, and we have, so it works both. We have some, partners that are taking it up. We have associates, and so we recently went through a process of making it, adding AI to our associate development program. So we now have 100% of our associates trained. I can't say using it yet, but as we get people trained, we see that the usage spikes. So it's growing algorithmically as we get people trained on it. So getting back to your question is, it gives you an advantage if you come in and you are one of the people who've already been using it and are comfortable, because we're making that more obvious. I mean, while everybody at our firm has been trained, not everybody is proficient or has good examples or can say, hey, I can do this work more efficiently. And we're, like most firms, we're at odds of, billable hour rewards versus efficiency awards. But we have, depending on your practice, we have plenty of projects that are fixed fee projects. We have plenty of projects that struggle to stay within budget. Like we got a lot to do and we have a budget we've agreed to, it's tight. And so even though we definitely reward people on billable hours, there's plenty of opportunity. If you can say to a partner, like, I can handle this work and I can get it done in, half the time that you may used to, because I'm comfortable with the legal research tools and the other tools, like we license Harvey and others. That's a huge benefit. And my probably safe bet on that is, if you're able to do a task in half the hours, but we're rewarding you on getting higher hours, that's still a good thing, because that partner and other partners are going to hear about it, are going to come to you even faster to say, oh, I can trust that you aren't going to overrun my budget, or that on a fixed fee, it's good for both of us. And so that you'll get more work because you're able to do it faster and with less cost. And so even we have this, this long-term change to be more strategic around pricing, like any other firm. But even today, coming in and being really proficient is good. And I'll give you one client case study where we worked with a large bank, and they're considering giving some work to us. And we examined that work, and we said, we believe we could get that work done, not cheaper, but we said for the same price or about the same price as that firm, but we can do it twice as fast. We call it cycle time. How fast can you solve my problem? And they said, wow, if you can get that work done twice as fast, I'll pay you the same amount of money and I'll give you the work. And as a matter of fact, I'll come give you more work.
Wow.
And I love that example, because it shows that our value is aligned. We want to get it done fast. And with the client, that had huge value to get these transactions moving. Or we have another one around IP clearance, global IP analysis. speed was a big incentive. And if you're an associate or summer showing us, I can get this work done in 2 hours, and we're not in no compromise in quality. In fact, we're seeing better quality in these examples. That's a huge value to us.
Super interesting to hear it from you on the front lines.
Yeah.
Do you think this is going to change the fundamental, like the billing model that, big law firms have traditionally used?
Well, there's been books written every 10, every decade for 50 years saying, the billable hour is going away. But yeah, I'd say it's getting safer to say that at least the percentage of deals it's going to accelerate. Billable hour for most firms is still the predominant. I was at a meeting with about 30 legal departments recently, and the number one takeaway from that was we have to figure out how to measure value. Now, I've been having this you talk about my earlier initiative, Legal Metrics. That's spending time with legal departments to say, how do we measure things? Like we are part of your supply chain. We're a vendor in your supply chain, but we measure things differently. We measure profitability as a law firm, but you measure things like cycle time and value and quality and efficiency and project management skill sets. And so how do we get on the same page about the metrics that we measure ourselves by? And the number one of those is value. But
Gotcha.
There is no measure of value. No one agrees what it is. But as we come closer to it, that can be very disruptive, because if I am billing you right now, I only have a discount to gauge value. Like, you gave me a 15% discount, so I assume that's value. But if we can really start to measure the value to the client, which means it gets done fast, it gets done with high quality, you've handled the risk properly, et cetera, then I think that'll be very disruptive, because they can look at the work I've done and say, well, you did the work and you gave me a discount, but actually the value is kind of a C minus. I can do better at another firm. And
interesting.
Right now we have brand versus value, and those are very different ways to decide what I should pay for work, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Amazing, David. Well, I'll just wrap with one final question. And I want to ask, where do you see the future of innovation going? I know it's a broad question, but that could be culture, that could be AI, in 5-10 years, what does that look like?
Oh my God, 10 years, I can't imagine. But I'd say we have an initiative we call Legal Teams of the Future. So we examine that very explicitly. We only look 3 years ahead, so I can't do 5 or 10. But I would say a core element of that is growing up as a business. We have a lot of firms that are $2 billion and above, real medium-sized businesses, and evolving from a collection of artists in a brand, which is kind of what law firms are. People acting in different ways, delivering different services and different methodologies, but all under a name of a firm. Evolving to a more normal business model where we're working together by a playbook to say, here is how we get M&A deals done, and here are the tools we use for that, and here are the expectations of how we measure that. And that's not something that we do today. It's not something any firm does today.
Wow.
But I think, becoming a real business and then being able to tune and streamline that business will provide more value to the client and more profit to the partners. I think that's the only way that we change. So it's a big, big deal.
Love it. Love it. Awesome, David. Well, this has been incredible. Thank you for pulling back the curtain on how innovation really works, especially in big law firms. I think our listeners will really appreciate this. So thanks so much for coming on.
I hope it helps. Always glad to share. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much.